The wind howled across the ice plains of Arcturus 7, a planetoid so cold that oxygen condensed into pale blue crystals in the air. Commander Jake Morrison watched through his helmet's display as the temperature gauge dropped to negative 200 degrees Celsius. This was the Galactic Coalition's infamous survival test, designed to push candidates to their absolute limits. Contestants, you have 72 hours, announced Overseer Kararthal, the insectoid administrator whose chitinous body was already showing frost patterns. Survive, and you earn your rank in the Coalition Defense Force. Fail, and, well, your species will find another candidate. Jake glanced at his fellow contestants. There was Velcrone, a towering reptilian from the volcanic world of Infernus Prime, already shivering despite his thermal suit. Beside him stood Lissa, a crystalline being from the Andromeda sector, her normally luminescent form growing dim in the extreme cold. The methane-breathing Chulath had already retreated into his survival pod, 3 of his 6 limbs showing signs of freezing. 23 species, 23 of the galaxy's finest warriors, and 1 human from Earth. The Overseer's compound lifted off, leaving them to their fate on this frozen hell. Most contestants immediately activated their standard-issue survival pods, huddling inside while their heaters fought a losing battle against Arcturus 7's relentless cold. Jake could hear their distress calls over the emergency channel within the first hour. But Jake didn't activate his pod. Not yet. Instead, he surveyed the landscape with a practiced eye, the same way his grandfather had taught him to read the Alaskan wilderness during those brutal winter camping trips. While the aliens saw only an endless frozen wasteland, Jake saw opportunity. He identified a shallow crater about half a kilometer away, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Using his suit's limited power reserves, he began dragging metallic debris from a long-abandoned mining station, pieces that other contestants had dismissed as useless junk. Human Morrison, your vital signs indicate dangerous exposure. Velcrone's voice crackled over the comm. You should activate your shelter. Appreciate the concern, buddy. Jake replied, his breath forming ice crystals inside his helmet. But I've got a better idea. Over the next 6 hours, while the temperature plummeted further and other contestants' distress beacons began activating, Jake worked. He constructed a windbreak from sheet metal, then dug into the ice using a sharpened piece of debris. The other contestants thought he'd gone mad, but Jake knew something they didn't. Cold wasn't just an enemy, it could be a tool. He positioned his survival pod inside the crater, but not activated. Instead, he surrounded it with the ice blocks he'd carved, creating an igloo structure that his Arctic survival training had made second nature. The crystalline ice of Arcturus 7 was incredibly dense, an almost perfect insulator when used correctly. Inside the shelter, he created a second wall using the metallic debris, leaving an air gap between the ice and metal, a dead airspace that would trap what little heat he generated. Finally, he activated his survival pod, but only its heating element, using the pod shell as the inner layer of his improvised thermal capsule. The temperature inside his shelter rose to a survivable negative 20 degrees. Compared to the negative 200 outside, it was practically tropical. Impossible, Lissa's weak voice came through. How are you generating such heat signatures? Physics, Jake said, allowing himself a small smile. And a little human ingenuity. By the second day, half the contestants had activated their emergency beacons, admitting defeat. Their high-tech pods, designed for 100 different environments, were failing because they relied purely on technology. They were fighting the cold with brute force energy expenditure. Jake was working with it. He'd even managed to rig a small heating element using components from his suit's backup battery and some conductive metal. Placing a container of ice near it, he waited. 30 minutes later, he had liquid water. Another 10 minutes, and it was hot. From his ration pack, he pulled out a tea bag, Earl Grey, his favorite, something he'd smuggled aboard against regulations. As he dunked it into the steaming water, he savored the absurdity of the moment. Here he was on one of the deadliest planets in known space, during a test that was killing alien warriors from species that had conquered stars before humans left their caves, and he was having tea. Morrison to all contestants. He broadcast on the open channel. Anyone need tips on staying warm? How about hot water if anyone wants to trade for rations? I'm thinking of making soup next. The channel exploded with disbelief. You're making soup? Velcrone's voice was barely a whisper, his systems clearly failing. Tea first, actually, but yeah, soup's on the menu for dinner. By the third day, the test was called early. Of the 23 contestants, only 5 remained. Jake, Velcrone, barely, Lissa, a silicon-based warrior named Grex, and 1 other. The Overseer's ship descended, and Karar Thal himself emerged, his compound eyes fixed on Jake's thermal capsule with something resembling awe. Explain, the Overseer demanded. Jake took a final sip of his tea. My people spent 200,000 years surviving ice ages with nothing but rocks and fire. We lived in places that got this cold without any technology at all. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. He gestured to his structure. Insulation, wind protection, heat conservation. The pod was just one component. You can't fight nature with brute force alone. You have to understand it, work with it, make it your ally. Karar Thal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Your species, you are classified as a temperate world species. This should have been impossible. Earth's a complicated place, Jake said. We've got deserts that hit 70 Celsius and ice caps at -90. We've learned to survive everywhere. It's kind of our thing. The Overseer examined the thermal capsule, the ingenious layering, the way Jake had turned limitations into advantages. In 3,000 years of conducting this test, no candidate has ever modified their environment so extensively. Most species accept the tools given and fight for survival. You build a home. Well, Jake said, packing up his gear, that's another thing humans are good at. Give us any hellhole in the universe, and we'll figure out how to not just survive, but thrive. That's what we do. As they lifted off Arcturus 7, Jake looked down at his thermal capsule, already being buried by the relentless ice and wind. Somewhere in the Galactic Coalition's databases, the human species was being quietly reclassified. Not as warriors, not as technologists, but as something perhaps more dangerous, adapters, survivors. The species that could make a home anywhere, that could turn a frozen hell into a place to have tea. And the galaxy was beginning to realize that there was nothing more terrifying than a species that felt at home everywhere.